So your deal in April, Cerberus coming out. What does that tell you that the smart money is doing right now in the real estate market?
Yeah, in the single-family market, it's absolutely a trend of consolidation. You have a handful, maybe half a dozen or more players that are getting bigger, that are buying the smaller companies because we've got institutional platforms, we've got lower cost of capital, access to the credit markets, and so you're seeing a lot of the smaller players ultimately sell for a variety of reasons, and I think it makes sense for the bigger players to continue to grow.
At the heart of this, though, is also about demand. And we've seen demand for rentals just go off the charts. And you have cheap homes. It's really hard to get a mortgage. And people just don't make enough money. Bloomberg News kind of crunched the numbers and looked at the affordability gap of what it meant for millennials to buy a home in places like New York or San Francisco. And it's $6,500 in New York. Way more if you count things like Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx. And it's $60,000 in San Francisco, $80,000 in San Jose. What does that chart look like to you in the next 5 years in terms of buying?
Well, there's absolutely a gap in certain markets. I think New York and San Francisco highlight really different trends. In the markets we're owning homes in the Southwest and Southeast, Florida, Atlanta, Dallas, Phoenix, the affordability is actually there. If you look at that same study, it's actually quite affordable to buy a home. But the reason you're seeing such strong rental demand is because not everyone can get a mortgage. So even though the affordability is there to buy a home, it's a great decision. We're buying homes. A lot of people can't do that. And so from a rental perspective, you're still able to get great value, a terrific home, without all the hassle of owning it. And that's what Silver Bay does. We buy high-quality homes in good neighborhoods that people want to buy, and maybe they'll buy in a few years, but rental option now is a viable one.
I was going to ask, what's the average age in your areas of people who buy?
Our average age are young families. They're in their 30s. Historically, they were first-time home buyers. But now what we're seeing is they're taking a few years to rent a home, some by choice and others because they need to build their credit back up. And so it's really great for our industry because it's a new segment, millions of people that are going to rent homes for 1, 2, maybe 5 years, but then they'll buy a home in the future.
What does this tell you about the U.S. economy and sort of where we are in a recovery cycle in the housing market?
So I think it tells us a couple of things. First, there are some demographic shifts. There's some lifestyle shifts that favor renting. People have seen that buying a home isn't a surefire way to create wealth, and they value flexibility. On the other hand, mortgage availability is a big driver of housing. And so we've seen that gotten certainly tight over the past 4 or 5 years. It may loosen up a little bit, but ultimately that's going to drive housing recoveries in the future. I think the economy is tepid. It's been okay for our business, but until you see income growth, unemployment get better, you're not going to see the housing market come back strongly.
And we kind of used to look at how's the housing market doing as a barometer of how the economy is doing. If we're seeing a structural shift into renting versus owning, does that change the way that economists and sort of the stock market needs to look at what the housing market means? Like, is it more how much people are willing to pay in rentals? Is it where people are renting that's more significant in your view?
I think it's shifted a little bit. I mean, certainly the construction component and the GDP growth component does drive GDP, and that's been fairly weak. You look at new home building, and it's nowhere near historical averages, but it is getting better. And I'd say until we see existing home prices continue to rise and get closer to what we look at, which is called replacement cost and what builders spend to build new homes, you're really not going to see construction really go forward and pick up GDP.
Do you own or rent?
I own.
He owns. Look at that. All right.